Okay, so hello and welcome to this webinar on social media, rich or poor, and what B2B should be doing. So I'm Rebecca, Senior Account Manager at Scout, and I'll be the host of today's discussion. So just a little bit about me before we begin. I've got over 4 years of experience working supporting businesses with social media, so everything from strategy all the way through to analytics. So after 4 years, it's safe to say I'm still learning about the topic because it is like evolving all the time. So really, what is this webinar all about today? So this is a discussion about what B2B should be doing to make their social media work better. So I've invited a Gen Z, a millennial, and a social media expert to find out their perspective and hopefully spice things up a little bit. So first, I'm going to be introducing our guests. So we have Sam Flynn, who's our social media expert, Sophie Beach, marketing coordinator at BHSF, and our very own Jack Doyle, senior account manager at Scout. So thank you all for joining. It would be great if you could all, I know I've done a bit of a brief introduction, but it would be great if you could all give a bit more background into your roles.
Fab,
shall we? Yeah, brilliant.
Fab. Hi everyone, I'm Sam Flynn. So I have been training businesses in the use of social media for 13 years now. And I predominantly work with B2B businesses. So I deliver training on platforms like LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. They're probably the top 3 most requested. But occasionally I get requests for the likes of TikTok, Snapchat, and Twitter, or X as it's now called. I work in-house with companies and deliver online training as well. And I've also taken on some social media for brands in the past too.
Thank you.
I guess I'll introduce myself next. So, hi, my name is Sophie and I'm a marketing coordinator at BHSF. I graduated from university back in July last year, and I've been able to gain a well-rounded knowledge of the industry since then by working as a social media, PR and communications executive in an agency, an EU marketing associate at Claire's Accessories, and now working at BHSF in my current position.
Amazing. And finally, Jack.
Great. Well, hi everyone. I'm Jack. I'm a senior account manager here at Scouts. So yeah, a bit of background on myself. Pure agency background. I think I've worked in PR agencies now for about 5 years. Anything from hotel, hospitality, consumer tech. Now, obviously with Scout, it's mainly B2B tech that I work with. And obviously as a millennial, just about. I've kind of grown up on social media as well. I've seen it evolve over the years and stuff. So yeah, I'm really excited to get stuck into this conversation about where it's headed, and yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you all for that amazing introduction. So I suppose it's we'll get into the first question. So the first one is a bit of an icebreaker, really. So which B2B brands do you think really nail social media?
Ooh, who wants to take it?
A bit of a difficult one because I know we're all used to seeing B2C quite a lot. But
I can kick it off.
Amazing.
I think a lot of the time when we think of social media, like aspirational social media companies, it is a lot of consumer, which is something I have a few points to talk about a bit later on. But I think in terms of B2B social media, there is generally a bit, it's a bit more corporate just by nature. But a brand that I always think stands out to me when it comes to like great social media strategy content for B2B is Slack, the workplace chat app. They just do a really good job of speaking to their audience. If you were to take a look through their Twitter accounts, their LinkedIn accounts, yes, you'll have the usual, new product launches, blog posts, kind of the usual wheelhouse of what a B2B brand will be posting about. But they do, do a really good job of balancing the art of humor with that as well. They often post memes, you know, using language and references that are quite Gen Z or Gen X. So kind of positioning themselves as like a fun brand, not so corporate, you know, kind of making jokes about their platform, engaging with the audience in a really fun way, which I just think is so refreshing for a B2B brand. I think sometimes it can be very, very corporate, very a bit stale sometimes. So the fact that they really lean into the humor and the fact that they kind of are they're part of workplace culture, I think is really, really fun. So yeah, that will probably be my kind of social media goals in terms of a B2B brand would definitely be Slack.
Thanks, Jack. And Sam and Sophie, is there any that sort of stand out to you?
Yeah, I think for me, another software one is Hootsuite, which is a social media management platform. And it's tricky because it's very much like Slack. I think the software ones are really, really good at it, and maybe kind of more what we might deem more corporate-based companies tend to be the ones that kind of struggle more. But yeah, definitely Hootsuite. They're really good. Very similar to Slack, actually. It's speaking to their audience as opposed to businesses. So they've highlighted their audience as social media managers predominantly. And so actually so much of their content is about how to excel in your role as a social media manager. It's about knowing your worth as a social media manager. They've just done a big report, actually. So a lot of their current posts are all about this, on being a social media manager and how much people are getting paid and, you know, how they're being undervalued, etc. So I think the fact that they don't create lots of content that's just, we're amazing at this and Hootsuite's brilliant at that and here's why you should use our platform. Instead, they're creating content that the audience wants to see and that's useful to the audience and builds a relationship with them. And I think that's a really good thing that other B2B brands could learn from. So it's not about the software necessarily. It's about really speaking to your audience and delivering content to them that they want to see, as opposed to just sales-driven content.
Completely.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so in terms of for me, in kind of like a similar way, but also not too similar, I quite like IBM as a B2B brand, just in the way that it showcases its heritage and its legacy in the technology industry. And so, like, for example, they use Instagram to share photos and videos of like their past products and for like the past hundreds of years. And just their showcased success and kind of like the repeated success throughout the years. I think also getting their colleagues involved and kind of them talking about these concepts and new technologies within the field. I think this type of storytelling is really good because it kind of promotes the brand values and also just about their innovation and kind of that trust with the customer. And as well as that, kind of like other B2B customers being like MailChimp, who use just the colourful interactive graphics. Because like even behind B2B, it's good because you're still like almost a consumer. Like the people that are still seeing this content are like a consumer. So having that attractive content, and also Adobe, who are leveraging on like the user generated content from people within the field that are creating these bits, they then share it on, and it's kind of building that customer loyalty again and that trust and that relationship a bit more.
Yeah, MailChimp's another really good example. I mean, I love the fact that I actually had a follow on their Twitter account the other day, and they often use things like, I hope this finds you well. They weave that kind of language in, like that kind of email culture stuff that they really lean into. I think it's fun. And like what you said, again, I think sometimes we run the risk in a B2B space of just thinking of B2B buyers not actually as people. Like these are people that have a sense of humor, you know, they don't just live and breathe software sales or, you know, industrial manufacturing tech or whatever it may be. So I think leaning into kind of the personal side of things is definitely such a powerful strategy for social in B2B.
Thank you. So I'll move on to the next question now. So Do you think B2B businesses underestimate the impact of social media? So this could be anything from like the contacts that you're working with on a day to day, the businesses itself. Is there any sort of experiences you can share? So I suppose who would like to sort of start first?
Well, definitely, I've noticed in delivering training that there is often more resistance from B2B companies than from B2C. I think that they've probably tried something like a LinkedIn page and then gone, oh, nobody's reading our posts, we're not getting any reach, it's pointless doing this. We don't want to be on any other platforms because it's only LinkedIn that's the B2B platform. So sometimes they do take a bit of convincing that it's actually can have a huge impact. And it's kind of back what you just said there, Jack, about you're speaking to people. The people that are buying from you are people. It's not a business, it's people. So I think once they keep that in their head, that actually they can use this as a way to build relationships with people. But I think the biggest thing that I've noticed, the kind of the shift change is when bigger businesses, or any kind of business really, but certainly bigger businesses, realize the impact that actually their individuals getting involved in social media can have as well. So for example, in the past, I've done a lot of work with Siemens, who you would imagine would just be focused on their main kind of Siemens social media channels. But the work I did with them was all about getting their senior leaders to really have their own presence on LinkedIn as individuals. And so many businesses underestimate the impact that that can have, that can come from actually individuals taking more of an approach on social media, building up themselves as a thought leader in the industry and so on. So that's one thing I've definitely noticed is even if they crack the marketing side and see that, oh yeah, absolutely, we'll have a LinkedIn page, sometimes they underestimate the impact that individuals on LinkedIn could actually be having as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to add on to that as well, that's a really, really great point about oftentimes when you have a company that comes to you, a B2B company, we'd like to potentially do some social. They come at it from the what can we do on our brand page, which is important. Yeah, we need to have great, run of content on the brand page. But like you said, raising the profile is so important. The engagement is always, it can be so much better when it comes from a person and their own network. It's a really great earned channel. And yeah, like it's a great way of just kind of boosting that profile raising kind of movement that you're trying to make elsewhere in the marketing, whether you're trying to do that as part of your PR program as well. Having some profile raising on a LinkedIn page is also really, really powerful for a B2B brand.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your points there. And I think it's the main thing is I feel like a lot of people outside of social media kind of see it as it's just a tool where we're producing the content, but it's not just that. We're also finding out what the competitors are doing, what trends are there in the industry, what type of content are people engaging with, what social platforms are the most effective for your business and like for the audience that you're trying to target, as well as like what's the optimum time to post for them to kind of see this and react to it, and how often you can post. So there's so many different elements that just branches out in social media. And obviously that's where it's underestimated, slightly. And especially with social media constantly evolving, as you said earlier on, Rebecca, we're just having to constantly monitor it and like educate ourselves as to what's new and what we can jump in and find the opportunities with.
For sure. And also just to add on to the kind of the underestimates points that we're making, I often feel like it underestimates a weird word, because I think that B2B brands definitely, they know that there's a huge value to social. They know they need to have a presence in social, but they underutilize it in a way. So, rather than planning posts months in advance or weeks in advance, that is important. It's important to be talking about your own products, any updates that are going on at the company. That's very, very important. But I think being able to jump on stuff that's happening in pop culture, what's happening in sport, what's happening in the news, being quick. This is actually a consumer example, but the same definitely applies to B2B. But when the Barbie movie came out, there was one consumer brand in particular that kind of came out 2 weeks later with its Barbie posts, and the kind of main comment was, I think you need to sack the marketing team, or when the approval process takes too long and you miss the boat. And that is something I fear that impacts a lot of B2B brands, the kind of red tape and the long approvals processes. I think to be a bit more fearless and just kind of jump on things in the moment would be of huge benefit most of the time.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's something that I hear the pushback all the time of like, we'd love to do this and that and that and that, but by the time it's got signed off, or that they have to really kind of stick within certain boundaries because of what top level management have agreed to is allowed and what isn't allowed on social media. So yeah, no, I completely agree with that. There's definitely a need for those at the top to understand just the impact it can have, and then feed that down to giving a lot more autonomy on it.
Yeah, and I think as well, like,
really good points. Sorry, Sophie.
Sorry, I was just going to add on there, in terms of like, I hear the word thought leadership a lot, and I think that's also very important, because it's good to jump on these newsworthy events as and when they happen, but it's normally the ones that spot it first are kind of like higher up on people's agenda, and people going, oh, they really care, and they're really kind of on this. But as you say, like, if you're doing it 2 weeks later, that's a bit harder, because it's just, are you just jumping on a trend here and not really caring about people's values and stuff as much, and you're just kind of almost woke washing, or just kind of promoting it even though you don't truly believe in it or have like an angle to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so they're all really good points, and I think that'll move us nicely on to the next question, which is there anything B2B can learn from B2C when it comes to social?
I mean, I think definitely, I think in general, I think there's, whether it's, I think there's stuff that a brand in one industry can learn from the next. As you'll know, working with me, Rebecca, I'm constantly posting in stuff that happens in the fashion industry. I think they always are just so big. Fashion brands are always really creative with their marketing, and it's always so inspiring. But I think in terms of my answer to this question, it goes back to that point about taking risks. I would love to see more B2B brands be a bit less corporate, shake things up every now and then, and kind of take that risk, whether it's with their tone of voice. I mean, I love the cheeky persona that some of the consumer brands are definitely taking on social at the moment. Aldi is a really good example with their kind of troll marketing. Every Christmas they kind of do this very light-hearted beef that they have with Tesco about, or M&S or the other supermarkets, about who stole what product, and I think it always generates a lot of engagement. Quote tweeting the rival supermarkets saying, oh, we had this cake first. It's just silly stuff like that that always tends to go kind of viral. And getting that really good balance with humor, I think is something that I would love to see more of in the B2B space, just taking a risk, being a bit less formal. That's definitely a trend that I've spotted.
Thanks,
I feel
Jack.
like I definitely agree with you in terms of B2B marketing can have a more technical and buttoned up approach to things when it comes to its messaging, whilst B2C brands tend to have more upbeat and personal touch across their messaging. And I think it comes back to the point that we mentioned earlier about that increased personalization. So although it's more technical and there will be some things we need to be a bit more formal on, I think it's just being able to cultivate these better connections and enable this two-way conversation through these kind of fun content as well as the more serious content. It's a better way that brands can foster a better brand experience that can lead to additional sales as well in the future.
Yeah, totally. It's pretty much what I was going to say too. It's all about their audience, and I think B2C works so hard on understanding exactly who their audience is, coming up with personas, really humanizing them. And I think B2B can often make the mistake of you know, if you ask them who's your audience, they'll say, oh, it's companies of such and such a size and such a location. And it's like, no, that's not your audience. That's your target market. It's two different things. So really working to understand exactly who their audience is, the people that they're trying to attract and that also that are following them, and then making content that really appeals to that audience, because that's what where B2C, so many B2C brands completely nail it, is being so audience focused, and where B2B can often be more brick structure, corporate, talk to businesses and not talk to individuals. And I completely agree on all of that. And also I often talk to businesses about what I call their brandonality, so the personality of their brand. And some businesses will say, don't really know, I don't think our brand has a personality. And I think that's something that B2C, whenever I've trained in the past, they kind of nail it straight away. Like, we're this, we're that. They've got all these kind of personality words that instantly come to mind. And sometimes B2B, they kind of go, oh, we're professional, we're corporate, and they get stuck there. So actually understanding what personality they want to bring to social media can really help guide them in their content and help them be that little bit more relaxed in what they're putting out and making sure it aligns both with them as a business and with their audience as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I think just another point to make here as well on the kind of what can B2B learn from B2C. I think when it comes to tactics, you know, social media, especially this year, it just seems like it's constantly changing, new formats being rolled out, new features being rolled out. Definitely since TikTok has arrived, there's been a shift towards video, whether that's real TikTok, everything's becoming very video based and these kind of 15-second videos. And I think what B2C gets so well, they do so well is they hop on these things instantly, you know, they instantly become expert in these new formats. And oftentimes I feel like B2B, maybe a couple of months later, they'll say, well, maybe we should do a reel, or, you know, maybe what is TikTok? And it's like, okay, let's instantly jump on these things, you know. You can always just spice up the tactics, spice up the content formats. It doesn't always have to be plain text post with an image or plain text post with a video. We can try something new. If it doesn't work, don't do it again. But I think B2C, just go for it. They try things, and that's kind of how they get ahead.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, that moves us like nicely onto platforms. So is it LinkedIn all the way? Is there actually a future for Twitter? And like Jack was talking about, what about TikTok? How should businesses be using it, or isn't it right?
I think with B2B, I mean, as with any business, B2C included, but probably more so B2B with the likes of TikTok, it is worth them really analysing who their audience are and whether they actually use platforms like TikTok, because it can be tempting to, you know, see headlines like TikTok being the most downloaded app of 2022 and like, okay, everyone's on it, let's jump on it as well. And then just completely bomb because it's just not where their audience is hanging out at all. So I think it depends a lot on understanding who their audience are and where that audience is. But having said that, you know, I think they're also quite quick to go, oh no, we're very professional, we're very corporate, we can't be on TikTok, and to almost streamline platforms into being one thing only. Like, I've spoken to so many businesses who say, well, we're not going on TikTok because we're not prepared to dance and we're not prepared to do daft things. And it's like, that's only one part of TikTok. You know, there's a lot of people on there sharing expertise, doing tutorials, showcasing different things. You know, so if you don't want to go down the humor route, you still can use something like TikTok and still can generate impactful videos. So I think there definitely is a future for, you know, B2B businesses understanding how to use platforms beyond LinkedIn, because, you know, like I say, there's that huge opportunity that they could be missing out on because their audience are there and they're using it every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to add on to that is a really, really great point as well. I think sometimes social media managers, especially in B2B, they'll hear TikTok and they think, well, I'm not getting up and doing, you know, a dance battle with them, you know, the HR team or whatever. So that's such a great point. And like you said, there is so many different areas of TikTok. I mean, it's so niche. There's people that only clean their house and they have millions of followers. There's people that only make toasted sandwiches. Like, it's so niche. And so it's important to have an understanding of what kind of content is out there on TikTok. But also, I think a good point to make is that you will have to some extent, play by the TikTok rules. LinkedIn, you can get on, you can be very corporate, and you can only talk about your products. With TikTok, I think you have to be a bit smarter about it. You do have to either be sharing educational content and weaving your product in there somewhere more creatively. So I think I was scrolling the other day and I saw a post on TikTok, and it was a girl walks up to another girl in the supermarket and says, "You have $1,000 and 1 minute. We're going to take you for a shopping spree." And I watched it. It was a really nice video. They bought her shopping, and only at the end was it, "Oh, we just asked one favor. Can you just say our product is now in Walmart?" And that was a really good way of tricking me into watching what was effectively an ad. So I think there's definitely a way that B2B brands can get in on that action. They just have to be really creative and understand the platform a bit if they want to weave their own product or service in there.
Great, thank you. Is there anything that anyone has to say about the future of Twitter? Just because I know that's like a bit of a hot topic, or it has been over the past few months. So is it worth businesses being still on Twitter and still actively using it?
It's tricky. I think the answer is it's really, really tricky. I mean, if they've already got an established audience on there, it doesn't make sense to just walk away from that established audience. So if they've already built an engaged following, then I wouldn't say, oh well, forget about it now because it's going in a completely different direction. So I would definitely, for those brands that have already got an established presence, keep up the hard work that you're doing on X, as it now is, or Twitter. But I would say if brands are starting to look at which platforms to use, I would, depending on the business, but most of the time I'd probably suggest that not to kind of go head diving into Twitter right now, and maybe just focus a bit more attention on the other platforms while we see where Twitter's going and what's going to kind of come of this complete rebrand to X. And we're not going to really see the true impact of that for a few months, I think, because as soon as any platform changes, there's either a rise or a dip. It's natural, and people either get frustrated or they get excited. So I think it's always worth sort of sitting back and waiting a bit. So I would say my answer would be, yeah, if they're already well established on there, keep going. There's no point walking away if it's carrying on working for you. But if it's a case of thinking, is it time for us to join and start using it? For most business, I'd say just focus on the ones that are actually, more stable right now.
Yeah, makes complete sense. So I'll just go on to the next question, which is all around measurement. So like, how important, in your opinion, is measurement and analytics when it comes to social?
I'll go first. I'll get my answer out of the way because I've always been a content creativity person, but measurement is definitely something I know a bit less about, but obviously very important. It's always important to know how well one type of content is, or one content pillar is performing versus the next. If you're comparing figures, you can say we're going to cut that off, we're going to cut that series off, or that type of post. So I think, like anything, it's really, really important. And a lot of these platforms have, analytics tools that are freely available to creators. So I think in order to refine your content strategy and make sure that that's performing as best as possible, it is so important to constantly be looking at measurement, especially as well if you're backing up stuff with paid too. It's important to look at the figures.
Great, thanks, Jack. I suppose, does anyone have anything else to add around measurement?
Well, I guess from me, like, I do completely agree with that. And I think the measurements that we get on like LinkedIn or on these social media management platforms, they're extremely valuable tools, and for reasons as well. So by measuring the performance on each of the social media channels that you have, you can it gives you a clear indication of who's engaging with your posts. Like, are we reaching who we want to reach, or is there an opportunity there to reach out to another audience on top of the audience we already have? In terms of the topic, like, has a topic brought any value that you're posting about? Is there any type of content, such as, I feel like people content's really engaging, and you probably want to post more of that, like where you can, just to make sure that you're getting the engagement that you are with this particular type of content, and like how we can capitalize on that. And I think, yeah, just overall, just being able to do these reports on a monthly basis, you can spot these trends and promote in the most effective way possible. And like in terms of like paid or organic campaigns, it can also help you a lot there, in terms of people can reshare the content, and then obviously that branches out further. And also in terms of with paid, you know who you're targeting and you know the type of demographic that you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think the thing we mentioned earlier about kind of having to feed things through to higher levels as well.
Yes.
I think measurement can be really powerful in, you know, if there is a bit of a underestimation from top level management, to actually show them, look at all the people that are engaged with us, look at, you know, how we're growing this following, how our brand is becoming more well known, look at the amount of traffic that's going from social to our website, and so on. Being able to actually almost prove it to someone can have a really big impact if they are skeptical or if they're not as committed to using social media. I think the only difficulty sometimes that comes from measurement is understanding ROI, return on investment, because social media is so tricky when it comes to that. Unless you sell products online and can, you know, straight away see that link from here's a post and it generated this many sales, I think sometimes that can be really tricky. So looking at things as well, like how can we actually understand what does working mean to us? So if, you know, we're asking the question, is our social media working? What does working mean? And is that, you know, focusing on alternative objectives to sales initially, but understanding that those objectives will lead to sales? For example, you know, increased brand awareness should lead to more sales, and increased engagement with our audience should lead to more sales. So I think it's also important to kind of make sure that the measures are proving its worth without just looking solely at ROI.
Yes, absolutely. It's a question that we're always asked as well as PRs. It's quite tricky to sometimes prove that link when you're not selling products. So I definitely agree, sitting down with the client and establishing clear objectives that are measurable and that can be linked back to the kind of social media measurement metrics that we have is so important.
And that takes us on to our final question. So what's the one piece of advice you would give to businesses, B2B businesses, to make their social media slay?
I love the slay there. One thing I always kind of come back to with most businesses, including B2C, that applies to the majority, not all of them, but to the majority, is what I call the 80-20 rule, where 80% of content really builds the relationship with your audience and 20% sells to them. Because often businesses are either doing one more than the other. For example, a lot of B2B businesses will just post sales messages, and that can be really disengaging for the audience when they get to a point of like, okay, I know what your product does. You don't need to tell me again. Yeah. And it doesn't give them anything to actually engage with. It doesn't give them the opportunity to add a comment, for example. Whereas when you combine that with the 80% kind of relationship building, that's where you can do your humor. It's when you can share your knowledge and show your expertise. It's when you can showcase your people and, you know, let people understand who works within the business, and all of that is really strong relationship building, so that when you do your kind of your 20% sales related posts, that relationship with the audience is so strong that they're far more likely to actually buy. So yeah, that would be my one piece of advice that, as I say, works for the majority of B2B businesses.
Thank you. Sophie and Jack, do you have a piece of advice you'd like to give as well?
Yeah, mine's pretty much a recap of what I've said today. And I think there's a quote that I'll adapt a bit here. It's, well-behaved brands seldom make history. I think just take risks. No one's asking you to come out and say something totally outrageous or controversial, but a risk could be anything from, trying this new feature that we know our competitors won't be trying for at least 2 months, trying to stay ahead of the curve, you know, the same way we newsjack a lot in PR, and it's so powerful. Try and hop on things as they're happening, to get that kind of real time, snag the news when it's coming out, and yeah, just take risks. Most of the time, risks like that do definitely pay off on social. So that would be my one advice too.
And I think from me, so my one piece of advice is kind of linking back to the last question. So it's learning from your analytics. So knowledge is power, and a lot of social media management involves looking at data and reviewing what has been successful and where you can make those improvements. So by using social media analytics in the right way, you can track the performance of your posts and campaigns, and you will be able to adjust your strategy accordingly to help you boost those key metrics and meet your target. So like, as we've mentioned before, LinkedIn has these metrics, but it's not just about looking at them on a day-to-day, it's more being able to report these back and just being able to kind of have that evidence behind you saying, this is what's working, this isn't something that we should be doing. And I think that's really important when it comes to social media and doing that background research.
Thank you. Yeah, well, that's been brilliant. That is the end of the questions. And before we go, I just wanted to say, like, thank you very much to each one of you for giving up your time today and contributing. So I hope that anyone watching has sort of learnt some interesting nuggets of information that they can take away and apply to their own social media feeds. And just one final remark from me is if you are looking for additional support, then please do feel free to get in touch, and we can always give our best advice to help. So yeah, thank you very much, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.